Aloha, everybody. We're very happy. I'm happy, very, very happy to say that we are here today. As you can see from some of the T-shirts that are around, it's the Abercrombie and Schatz team. Abercrombie and Fitch has shamelessly stolen from the Abercrombie and Schatz team, but we're very big-hearted about that. We're willing to let them in on the grand scheme. We're very happy to be here working together. We've been, since the night of the primary, I think all of you are aware, we've been crisscrossing the state, meeting with our supporters, meeting with these supporters of the other candidates for lieutenant governor, the other candidate for the governorship, Mufi Hanneman's folks, all the other folks associated with it. We're very pleased to say that we think we're putting together a coalition for change that was, I think, the bottom line for everybody who was running in the primary. And so we want to indicate today that as a result of the continuing conversations that we've had across the state, that we're ready to move into and have been moving with our grassroots and netroots campaign to see to it that the start that we made with, as you may recall, the New Day in Hawaii, the comprehensive plan to restore public confidence. We're ready to move on that into our next phase, if you will, which is the recovery and the reinvestment plan. The first was a vision about where we wanted to go, and now this recovery and reinvestment plan is how we're going to get there. And we're looking forward to making the maximum use of public dollars. We're looking forward to restructuring and reworking state government within the state general fund plans that the Lingle administration has put forward. After all, that's the basis for whoever is elected governor having to make decisions with the Economic Council on Revenues and the Economic Research Council at the University of Hawaii. We have decided to use their figures. We're not trying to create our own. You've heard me say before that we're swimming in the water that we're in. We intend to work with the existing numbers. We intend to make maximum use of the public dollars. We intend to make maximum use of the capacity to restructure, reorient, reprioritize what we're doing with state government. We will not be raising any taxes. What we will be doing is utilizing state government in a way that brings the hope and change that people want. I'm very, very pleased to say to you today that as this partnership unfolds, that Brian will be taking the lead on our recovery side, working with that, and is going to give us a rundown on that as we move towards the reinvestment side and ready to go on November 3rd. We knew where we wanted to go. The people approved that during the primary, whether it was in the lieutenant governor's contest, whether it was in the governor's contest, the nomination contest. People wanted change. People wanted a new direction. They did not want more of the same. They did not want more of why we can't do things. They wanted to know, how are we going to get to where we want to go? And so the Abercrombie Schatz team is providing today with its recovery and reinvestment plan, the how to get there. Ryan?
Thank you, Neil. And we're really excited to be here to move change forward. Neil articulated a vision for a new day in Hawaii, and he was resoundingly nominated. And we are into the next phase. This is not a budget, but this is a framework for implementation of that new day. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the phases of the recovery, which will be followed by reinvestment, but that's about 2 years from now. So what I'd like to focus on is the elements of recovery. First, we have to maximize every external dollar, including but not limited to federal resources. That goes to the Recovery and Reinvestment Act on the federal side, making sure that out of the $1.3 billion that's been allocated to Hawaii, that we get about $500 million that has not yet been spent properly, and also making sure that those monies that are allocated to individual state departments advance our long-term priorities like clean energy, and educational advancement, especially in the area of early childhood. Secondly, we're no longer going to cut little bits of the government that actually stop business from being conducted. And one of the best examples here is the State Historic Preservation Division. Without a state historic preservation permit, construction projects can't move forward. And for the want of a few $100,000, we have decimated that division. And the reason that matters is we have construction projects that are ready to go, but for that approval. So there are going to be specific areas where a very small investment is going to jumpstart our economy because there are businesses that are waiting for government functions to be restored. Another good example of that is our agricultural inspection program, whereby it's impossible, literally impossible, to get our crops out without adequate numbers of inspectors. Third, we're going to make some structural changes, and these are not structural changes that require the approval of the legislature or even a Chapter 91 rulemaking process. These are changes we can make instantly, and a perfect example of that is to bring the president of the university and the superintendent of education into cabinet meetings. These are changes that we can make right away, and there are lots of instances as we go across the state and talk to managers in the government and also people in the private sector. There are lots of things that we can be doing right away that don't require the approval of the legislature and don't require additional funds. And finally, utilizing the state's bonding power. The state right now on the books has about $1 billion in capital improvements projects for infrastructure, for schools, for hospitals, roads, and ports. And a significant portion of that has not been let out. Now, those numbers are already loaded into those projections, so there's just no good reason not to go ahead and float those bonds and get those projects off the ground. Interest rates will never be lower, and our need will never be greater to inject resources into our economy. And finally, specifically with respect to the state's bonding power, one of the reasons that we have not moved forward with technological improvements in terms of the way state government works is that we've been paying for technology investments via cash. And that was an old way to do things, but this is a new day. Other states and municipalities are floating bonds for technology improvements, and that will allow us to amortize the cost over a number of years. Why does that matter? Because we have antiquated systems, and because people would rather be online than in line. And if we make this investment now, we can save money and deliver better services over the long run.
So you can see that we're ready to go on November 3rd. If you really want to see an economic recovery, if you really want to see energy independence, if you want to see us moving on food production, if you want to see us not have headlines like we did in today's Star Advertiser, where we see babies at risk, mothers at risk, and the head of the health department saying, well, we're looking for ideas, we're looking for solutions. They're already there. The Healthy Start program that had the positions cut show exactly what Brian and I are talking about. Because there were across-the-board cuts, because we did not zero in on what our values are and what our priorities are, we actually found ourselves cutting into the very programs that enable young children and mothers to be able not just to survive, but to thrive. And Abercrombie Schatz administration is going to reprioritize, reorder, refurbish government in a way that's going to see to it that we take what we have, the dollars that we have, the programs that we have, the people that we have, and we're going to make it work. We're excited about it. We're ready to go.
If you're going to reprioritize and I forget the other word you use, but if you're going to take...
We're going to reprioritize. As a result, we're going to recover, and when we recover, we're going to reinvest.
All right, so if you're going to take dollars that you already have, you're not seeking new dollars, new tax hikes, or anything like that, then what are you going to cut or shrink in order to pay for these new programs, these new priorities?
We're going to be maximizing dollars that are not being utilized right now. We're going to leverage dollars into the system that we have right now in order to see to it that not only we can pay for what we have right now in terms of personnel and in terms of programs, but we're going to lay the foundation for expansion. In fact, Brian, I think during his explanation of what we're going to do in the recovery phase, talked about maximizing those dollars.
Right, and the other thing, Herbert, is just to give you one perfect example. Neil has been talking a lot about moving forward with early childhood education and funding that early learning council. And the old way to do things would be to assume that in order to establish a new Department of Early Childhood and move forward, we got to spend $60 million and assemble a new bureaucracy. Well, that's not the way we're going to do things. With $250,000, we can serve as a coordinating entity and get what is already happening to happen in a more strategic fashion. We can pull down federal funds, we can bring in private financing, but the idea that the budget is so rigid that the only thing that can be done is cut everything across the board, that's the old way of doing things, and we're moving on from that.
We're getting recommendations on early childhood, for example, that will cross department levels. Right now we have silos. Right now, we're compartmentalizing what happens. But we're going to integrate the judiciary, the Department of Education, the Department of Health, the Department of Human Resources. We're going to work in a way that allows those already in those programs to work in a much more effective and a much more comprehensive way. We're going to have an integrated approach. That doesn't take money. It takes some brains. It takes some commitment. It takes people utilizing their initiative, utilizing their talent, utilizing their commitment. That's what's going to happen in an Abercrombie Schatz administration. That's why people want a new day. They want enthusiasm. They want people who say they can get the job done, not telling us why it can't get done. We're going to reorganize, not because it costs more money. It's not only going to save money, it's going to make money for us. Every child that does not end up in Kapiolani Hospital with severe difficulty, severe physical challenges. That's the kind of thing that not only saves money, it's an investment in that child's future. It's an investment in Hawaii's future. So what that takes is reorganization, reprioritization, then you get recovery, and then you get reinvestment.
On that reinvestment piece, so is the dollar figure associated with that no net change, a little bit of net change, like $250,000 here, $250,000, or have you quantified it? Is there a number?
Are you talking about reinvestment in phase 2?
Yes.
Yeah. What's the quantifiable new spending?
I'll give you.
Saying it's zero?
No, quite the opposite. A little investment like the $250,000 for the Early Learning Council. It's already there. It's authorized. The appropriations simply need to be reallocated into the Learning Council to make those recommendations. One of the things that you know they're going to come up with is to advance the School of Public Health at the University of Hawaii. There's federal dollars out there right now. With a little investment by the state now, we have a multiplier effect of dollars coming into the state. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
So do you have a cost, like a net
Well, I think it's important
to this reinvestment phase?
Right, Gina, and before I talked about phase 1, I was trying to be clear, this is not a budget, right? This is a roadmap for the budget, and once Neil and I, if we're fortunate enough to be elected, are working with budget and finance and working with our department directors, we'll have a more clear picture on the dollars and cents aspects of this. But this is really an implementation plan and a basic approach, which is to not assume that the only thing we can do is that what we've been doing, not just for the last 8 years, but for the last 40 years. Government has been configured in a certain way over the last 40 or 50 years. And that's no one's fault. It was made very intelligently a long time ago. But times are changing. The Department of Agriculture, for instance, is essentially configured for a certain kind of agriculture. Times are changing in terms of what our local farmers need. We're going to have to look at how to service our local farmers better. And so this is really about the approach that we're taking, for instance, to early childhood or energy production or any of these other issues.